Well, when I was in high school and college, we didn't have a lot of choices when it came to listening to some of the most vibrant and innovative and just plain old funniest comedians of the era. We could stay up till 11:30 and maybe see them for 5 minutes on Johnny Carson, but they sure weren't getting on prime time. So the other alternative was to sit down around a record player with friends and put on a comedy album. Then we could actually hear what the comic had to say from beginning to end and hear the kind of comedy that wasn't going to be allowed even at 11:30 at night on Johnny Carson. The kind of comedy that would be on the comedy clubs. George Carlin was one of our favorites, and it was a nice community activity because you'd sit around and then never be able to hear the comedy record because people began to laugh so hard they would be rolling around on the floor, snorting through their nose or worse places, because things were so funny. Their lives were on this record. One of our favorite albums was George Carlin's Class Clown. Everybody was now. I was a quiet class clown. I was more like the scriptwriter for the class clown because I didn't want to get in trouble and go to the principal's office. So I would be sitting near the back, and the teacher would say something, and I would say something, and then the class clown would repeat it out loud, and he'd go to the principal's office. And therefore get a lot more glory, whereas I would shrink down hoping I wasn't spotted or caught. It took me a long time to realize that the glory you had when you actually spoke up loud enough to be heard outweighed any shame that you might have walking down the hall, that they didn't actually string you up by your thumbs anymore. That's because I did grow up in schools where there was corporal punishment before junior high and high school. And on Class Clown, George Carlin tells about an experience that many of us shared, not necessarily you, because like me, he grew up going to Catholic school in an era where you would never tell your parents that the nun hit you or smacked you over the fingers with an iron ruler because they'd figure you'd done something to deserve it and you'd get another smack. So you couldn't win. You kept it very quiet. There was this conspiracy of silence, which nowadays, as we learn more about what happened, may not be quite so funny. But as George Carlin's Class Clown talked about the funny things that happened, in Catholic school, and one of them had to do with mysteries. You see, every time you asked the nun a question that she couldn't explain, her response was, "It's a mystery." Now, mysteries were a very dangerous subject. We would be reminded that the great 4th century African theologian Augustine was once asked a question about a mystery. He was asked, what was God doing in the ages before he created the earth? And the answer, we were told, was thinking up tortures in hell for people that ask such questions. Now, I'll tell you his real answer towards the end of this message. But that was quite a thing to hear as an 8-year-old. But Carlin remembers that you were supposed to save up your extra mysterious questions for the day when the priest would come in to talk to your class for heavy mysteries time, and he talks about how there's always the kid that raises his hand, and then when he's called on, he doesn't put his hand down, but keeps it up while he asks the question, to which the priest responds, "What are you, the Statue of Liberty?" But anyway, the kid would get up and say, Fada, can God make a rock so big that he himself cannot lift it? And everybody would laugh in the class because maybe they'd finally caught him on one. But the favorite thing would be something very legalistic. Growing up Catholic, we had to do something called our Easter duty once a year, which means that from sometime between the first Sunday of Lent and the Sunday of Pentecost, we had to receive communion. And in order to receive communion, it meant we had to go to confession. And I'm convinced that the reason my oldest sister was the only one who figured out I wasn't Catholic anymore after I was 16 was she observed I didn't do either anymore. So she was the observant one who then began to give me a hard time. It took me 2 more years to find the brethren, but it worked out pretty good in the end. So anyway, but the Easter duty, what they would ask questions about was, what if you were at sea and you wanted to receive communion before Pentecost Sunday, but, you fell into a coma, but then you woke up and it was past Pentecost, so you hadn't done your Easter duty, but then you crossed the international date line. Would God let you take the Easter duty? Would it count somehow? You were looking for all these things to answer the mystery of our faith. And it may seem funny looking at somebody else's faith when I think of my childhood and listening to that record about, the childhood I had and that others had, and how my friend Tony Zarati, we couldn't even hear the album anymore because he didn't stop laughing, rolling around on the floor. And maybe we were speaking out of the pain we had and our disillusionment with some of the human aspects of faith when we weren't really understanding what a true mystery is, what the mystery of faith is, what Paul is talking about. You see, he is speaking to the Ephesians. Ephesus was one of the most important cities of Asia Minor. It was on a major trade route. It had a hill on which there was the temple of the goddess Artemis, the hunter goddess, who probably would have been very, very popular in rural areas here in America, where people are also hunters. She blessed their hunting. And the city drew a great deal of its economy from tourists coming to see the temple and buy little silver replicas of the temple. It's the same in the ancient world as it is now. You go somewhere, and whether you go to that machine that smashes your penny, or whether you buy salt and pepper shakers in every place you stop, or whatever it is you do, as tourists, people go and bring back something that shows they were there. And Paul's message spoke to some of the basic questions that people had. You see, Ephesus was a center of worship for the goddess Artemis. It was a center for worship of the emperor as a god. And it was a center for the mystery religions. The mystery religions were those in which people were told that it's only by becoming an initiate and paying more and learning more and going through layer after layer that you get to the real truth. That you who come to worship, it would be as if I said here, well, I'm glad you know something about Jesus, but if you want to know the real truth about Jesus, start coming to this group or that group. Christian churches don't do that. They don't act like a particular Bible study or Sunday school class or women's fellowship group or group in the kitchen somehow has the real mysteries of the church. No, we would never do that. We would never create layers that people have to go through in order to find the real truth of the faith. Well, Paul was speaking to that. He says, let me tell you about the real mystery. The real mystery is that there is no mystery. It's all in plain sight. Jesus is crucified on a cross on a public road with a public declaration of his crime in 3 different languages, nailed to the cross. Jesus is raised from the dead and is seen first by the women, then the apostles, then by over 500 believers, as he says in 1 Corinthians 15, some who have fallen asleep, but many who are still with us. Jesus proclaimed his message out in the open. And the things that other people are ashamed of, we're not ashamed of. Jesus dies on a cross, a very shameful thing, and yet it is the proclamation of the faith. Paul begins this chapter. This is why I, Paul, am a prisoner of Christ for the benefit of all the nations. You don't mention that you've got a record. You don't mention that you're in jail right now as you write this. But just as Martin Luther King Jr. wrote from a Birmingham jail to other ministers who were encouraging him to, can't you just lay low and not raise a fuss? Can't we just deal with Jim Crow and prejudice and hope it goes away someday when people are all just nice? So Paul says, I'm in jail. I'm in jail for Jesus. And that's the first thing I'm going to tell you. Paul, a prisoner for Jesus Christ. What you are ashamed of, we proclaim. We let people know, yeah, I do get up on Sunday morning when the bed covers feel so warm, and the best thing might be a cup of coffee or tea with our feet up in the recliner, binge watching old movies. But we get up. The mystery is there for everybody to see. And it is, I love this word. It's translated the administration of the grace of God, but it also means the economy, the fellowship. Everything is tied together. The wonderful mystery is that we are bound by love, by faith, by money, and by the common intent to be God's people. The economy of the grace of God means there is no insiders or outsiders anymore. In the previous chapter, Paul said, those far off are now brought near, and it is here for you. And he talks about how everybody now is a co-inheritor. We don't have the people that are going to have all the faith and all the secrets and all the money. We don't have layer after layer, but we are all co-inheritors, all part of the body. And what are we part of the body of? Through the deaconship, which is the gift of grace that is given to us. And that deaconship, which sounds so official and churchy, refers to the gutty slave work that has to be done around the temple. The thing we share, which we are not ashamed of, is that somebody in the church and somebody in the house and somebody in the hospital has to clean the toilets. That's what that deaconship refers to in the ancient world. Somebody has to mop the floors. Somebody has to disinfect this whole place. Somebody has to clean the parking lot. If we boast of anything, that's what we boast of. Not how many ribbons we can wear, not how many medals clink against each other, but how many calluses we have and how many cuts and scrapes from clearing things out before people can park in the morning. Jesus is not distant. Paul mentions the powers and the authorities and how all those things are put under. How all those things are put under the Jesus who dies on the cross. This can all be a cause for shame, but for us it's a cause for boasting because we love the people who we serve here in this room. And we seek to learn to love the people we're going to serve beyond these boundaries. That's the mystery. A little earlier, I mentioned that we were told, Augustine said, what was God doing before the world was created? Thinking up tortures for those who would ask such questions. Boy, that would put a scare into you as a kid. Here's what he actually said. And now I have my answer to the man who says, what was God doing before he made heaven and earth? Someone once, evading the force of the question, is said to have made the jesting reply, God was making hells for people who look too deeply into things. That is not my answer. To make a joke about something does not mean that one understands the subject. No, that is not my answer. Personally, I would rather say, I don't know. When I don't know, then make the kind of reply that brings ridicule on somebody who has asked a deep question. I would rather say I don't know than heap scorn on somebody who asks a deep question. Thank heavens our kids ask deep questions for which we don't always have an answer. Why is everybody ignoring the refugees streaming out of war-torn places around the world? Why is it that some of us have plenty to eat and some don't have anything to eat? Why is it that our DNA shows that we are 97% the same? And yet in 2016, some people in America are still making a big deal about the color of other people's skin. I don't know. But I would also say, I don't know why we're not doing something about it. I don't know why we're not reading the words of Jesus and the letters of Paul and recognizing, as he says, we are all part of one economy. We are all part of one faith and one body. The nations, all the nations, are being made one. So maybe the real mystery, maybe the only mystery, is why we've had these words for 2,000 years and people are still ignoring them, misquoting them, or dismissing them. On Wednesday nights, we are sharing the mystery of God's promises with each other. And if you haven't signed up to help, the real mystery is why. Why wouldn't we want to serve our children and teach them? We have sign-ups for fellowship time. And the only question is, why would people not want to serve others? We have an invitation to come and share the feast of the Lord on Maundy Thursday, later this year. And the only mystery is, what do you have going that's more important than sitting down at the table of Jesus and breaking bread with each other and washing each other's feet? We have a world that says, take care of ourselves first. And the only mystery is, why are you listening to people like that? Because when you start taking care of your own first, you keep making the circle smaller and smaller until the circle only includes me. Fortunately, we have so many bright examples. Nelson Mandela, who responded to decades of hatred that kept him in a tiny prison cell, by responding with love and forgiveness as he left prison and became the leader of his nation. Of Dorothy Day, who responded to a choking atheism that gave her no hope by returning to her Christian roots and then staying in the poorest part of town the rest of her life in New York City to serve the least of these. We have the example of Martin Luther King, who taught us to return love for hatred and to turn the other cheek literally so you can be hit again. And we have the example of saints in our own midst who challenged us and let us know there was a world beyond ours. Well, it sounds like the mystery's solved. So as you go home, respond to great questions, perhaps with the words, I don't know, and then finish the sentence. I don't know why I haven't done anything yet, but I'm starting today. I'm reading my Bible today. I'm keeping my eyes open for opportunities for ministry today. I am praising God not only in word, but in deed. Indeed, let us do that. Amen.